Burnout and self-care. That's the topic of this brief video. I've been noticeably absent on this and every channel over the last week or so because after over 2 years of non-stop, what feels like non-stop sense making around the issues surrounding COVID-19, relentless amounts of activism, campaigning on the issues, last week I finally reached a point of exhaustion. It's felt like a complete roller coaster. Some of my friends called it the Corona coaster. That's been unfolding for the last 2 years. And like many, we haven't stopped. We just haven't stopped to take a break. I mean, 2020 was just a bizarre year where, people were furloughed, people were not working, and they had these extended breaks. Well, myself personally, and I know a lot of us are the same too, but what began with the Elevate Live project in 2020 to try and keep people engaged and motivated for this unprecedented time during the first lockdown, we created a project where literally went live 3 to 5 times a day for 50 days straight, and then took a break from that in order to reflect upon how I would begin to tackle the issues with COVID-19, because from a very early point, as early as January and February 2020, I realized that there was a growing gap between the underlying reality and the perception that was created in the media, so much so that the project that I was running, even though we'd reached over 100,000 people and were getting really, really solid feedback, I felt that it was not right anymore for me to stand on the sidelines and just watch what was happening. So lo and behold, then I started the Pandemic Podcast. We've since recorded over 500 episodes. Just an insane amount of content, an insane amount of research has gone into that, preparation, analysis, sense making, etc., to try and make sure that we present credible information. Of course, got heavily involved with the activism, numerous marches, campaigns, etc., etc. Recently launched this Elevate Network, and now months on from becoming a father, the sleepless nights combined with everything else last week knocked me off my feet and forced me to take a break because I became so exhausted. So I wanted to share this brief video firstly to say hello, I'm fine, well rested, finally taken some time off to catch up on some much needed sleep, started to prioritize my nutrition, and really get myself back on an even keel after what has been a mind-blowing 2 years, because the journey is just beginning. Let's be honest. There's a lot of work to do moving forward in order to create transformation and recovery in the wake of COVID-19, as well as the ongoing activism and pursuit of justice that's going to be necessary through public inquiries, international tribunals, court cases, etc., in order to tackle some of the issues that have really been violated over the last year or so. So lots to do, and need to be very well energized to take on these issues. So I wanted to share this brief video to talk about self-care more importantly, because I know many of us have felt the challenges of going through what we've gone through over the last couple of years. It's tested all of us mentally and emotionally and spiritually. I think it's tested all of us in very different ways. But it's really important that we learn the lesson and don't get hit hard to the point like I did, where I got knocked off my feet and was forced to take a break in order to get that lesson. So I wanted to share a few things. Number one is that up until 2020, health and vitality were my primary drivers. I was verging on obsessed with healthy living, everything from my nutrition to workouts, mindfulness and different practices to ensure that I remain energetic, youthful, healthy. And over the course of the last 2 years, those practices have been challenged. Of course, we had the gym closures, which forced me to think differently about my workouts and ultimately suffered. But also, as I took on more and more projects, the health priorities, the health practices and the fitness were the first things to go. And the biggest thing I've learned in the last week or so is that actually those are the foundation. You can't violate your health practices if you want to go on and achieve the things that you're working on. And that was a stark reminder to me how important it is to prioritize my health and fitness no matter what, in order that I show up as best as I possibly can for my family, as a new father, as a husband, to my family, my wider friendship circle, my colleagues, and ultimately to live with vibrancy through the projects and work that I'm doing. Because if you're tired, you don't show up as your best, you don't make your best decisions, and ultimately you become less effective, less productive, and less of an enjoyable human being to be around once you reach that point of tiredness and exhaustion. So I'm reminded how important it is to prioritize health and well-being, particularly given that we've been through a quote-unquote health crisis over the last 2 years. It's not, well, it is surprising. Actually, it's surprising that we haven't spoken more about health, not only on the Pandemic podcast, but actually more broadly across society, given that many of the problems that have been incurred have largely been, the burden of which has largely been taken by those who have got poor health. So it's a really good opportunity for all of us to reflect on our health challenges, not just myself having been knocked out last week due to exhaustion. So number one, my lesson is to prioritize and continue to prioritize health and well-being, and make sure that the daily practices, the workouts, the good nutrition, the time out, the mindfulness, the meditation, the journaling, all of the activities that keep me on tip-top condition have to be prioritized. And I know for many of us, the last 2 years has challenged that. And I invite you to join me in restoring those practices. On the second point, on the topic of journaling, part of the reason why I think I felt so overwhelmed last week is by the sheer volume of tasks and information points that I'm dealing with. Collectively, I've got over 30,000 unread messages across all of my channels. Apologies if I've not got back to you. We've reached over 15 million people with the podcast, and lots of people have reached out. We have a small team, but even with the team we've got, we can't keep up. But I take that personally, and I see those red notifications every day, and it becomes a stressor. But as does the growing task list. Taking on more than you can chew. I tend to, anytime there's something that comes up that could contribute to change, I tend to say yes and think about it afterwards about how I'm going to actually make it happen. So it's been a real lesson in terms of prioritization. But more importantly, rather than just recognizing the burden of tasks and the number of inputs that you take on, it's actually when you enter into that realm, when you've got so much happening, it's very difficult to see the wood through the trees in the sense of, where are we actually heading? What are the objectives? And I think one of the tension points for me going over the last couple of weeks has been this lack of certainty about the direction, because I've been so caught up in the doing, the daily tasks. And of course, all of those things start to make a difference. But actually, in the business world, we talk about working on the business, not just in the business. And the same is true here, whether we're looking at content or campaigns or building a community. And it really struck me that in order to make a transformation here, we need to be really clear on the direction that we're heading. And I think there's been the nagging feeling inside of me that I haven't spent enough time thinking about that pathway ahead, which is where actually I really come alive, and that's where I flourish. So there's a couple of points there. Number one is managing around our workloads and making sure that we are able to take time out to review and reflect and refocus to make sure that each of us are on the right path and we're moving towards the actual destination rather than just doing the work for the work's sake. It's important to be clear on our vision, our purpose, and our goals and objectives as a matter of course that comes with that. And then the next piece around that is working in our flow zones, because for me personally, I'm very clear on what I call my entrepreneurial bliss, which served me well prior to 2020, when all I focused on was entrepreneurship rather than campaigning and trying to take on these issues, which has altered the course of my life. But my bliss stood for big picture thinking, leadership, inspiration and ideation, strategy, and solving problems, or being a spearhead. Those are the things that bring me greatest joy. They're my greatest strengths. And when I'm outside of that bliss zone, I tend to be less effective, but I also start to grind to a halt when it comes to kind of my energetic source. And I believe every one of us has a bliss zone. It's not necessarily an acronym of bliss like my own. But when we're outside of that flow zone, we can start to feel heavy and feel like we're pushing a rock up a mountain. And I've certainly felt like that in recent weeks when I've got involved in the kind of detail of things and not had the opportunity to spend as much time in the kind of big picture strategizing position where I do my best work. So it's been a real lesson in terms of prioritizing health, as I mentioned, also making sense of the kind of number of tasks and volume of inputs and how to manage those things to ensure that we stay on track with our big picture outcomes, but then also making sure we stay in the flow zone, because actually, as much as the task list is overwhelming, it's more overwhelming when it's a series of tasks that are outside of the area where I feel I can contribute most. And I'm sure many of you will relate to that kind of experience. So I wanted to record this video to say, well, if I've been notably absent from all these channels, there's a reason for it, but I'm now very well rested and very much excited for the journey ahead. I'm rejuvenated. I've got the wind in my sails again, and feel really certain and clear about the direction forward from here, in order to start to create real transformation beyond COVID-19, but also to finish the work we've begun in terms of ensuring that there are no further restrictions, mandates anywhere around the world. You know, to borrow the phrase or to steal the phrase on used by Matt Hancock earlier this year, where he said that no one is safe until we're all safe, to actually put out in different contexts and say no one is free until we're all free. No one is free until we're all free of mandates and restrictions, but also clear in how we can start to bring accountability through the courts and various other different mechanisms. So, but beyond that, more importantly, how we actually create long-term transformation, because tackling the issues at hand and also looking for justice, that's all rear-facing. We're looking in the rear-view mirror. Whereas now we have the opportunity to look forward. And what this brand is all about moving forward, the Elevate brand, is about how we do that. How do we transform ourselves in order to transform the world around us? How do we actually find solutions to the big problems that we've witnessed? Because, you know, mandates and restrictions, they're really symptomatic of a bigger problem, a deeper problem. And we've become more and more aware of what those problems are over the last couple of years. I think all of us have felt them. And I feel like we're going through a period of what I call the de-industrial revolution, where we're looking to decentralize the power structures. We're looking to bring back autonomy to local communities, building resilient communities on a local level, becoming more self-sufficient, extracting ourselves from this kind of consumerist mindset that kind of pumps the big machine, where everyone's kept on a kind of hamster wheel of stress and anxiety, and solving that through more and more consumerism, to a point where we actually become really worn out and burn out, much like I did last week. But actually, rather than that, we look at the opportunity to how we can begin to reconnect to nature, reconnect to our true selves, reconnect to our communities, and actually do things much more from the ground up rather than from the top down. So I think there's a really exciting time to be alive right now. I think we're going to see and certainly wish to be part of and help lead a counterculture kind of transformational movement over the next year or so, or into the next half of this decade, in order to start bringing about that sweeping change that's needed in order to tackle the underlying problems that we've witnessed over the last few years. So we're all going to need a lot of energy to do that. So this message is a message to myself as much as it is sharing my own insights with you from my experience in the last couple of weeks. But I do believe that we are at the precipice of change, and we are reaching a threshold point when it comes to the issues surrounding to COVID-19. The narratives are beginning to collapse. The things we've talked about over the last couple of years are becoming mainstream awareness. Very proud of the role we've played in unpacking some of that, but we're still going. There's lots more to unpack, and there's lots more to put into action. But as I said, more importantly, there's a real opportunity for us to now move forward and start to do things differently. And that's how we create a better future. So here's to a vibrant and exciting future. Thank you very much for watching this brief video. And thank you very much for being part of our community. If you haven't already signed up to our Elevate network, now is the time to do that. Come and join us at Elevate. We are elevate.org. That is, we are elevate.org. And you can join our community there and take part in all the work that I've been talking about throughout this video. So thanks very much for tuning in, and look forward to connecting with you shortly.